USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, December 5th, 2019. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Two of the best programs in Hockey East over the last decade face off in a home-and-home series this weekend, UMass Lowell and Providence.
And joining us now on the Game of the Week podcast, the head coach of UMass Lowell, that is Norm Bazin. Norm, a good weekend for your team last week. You take home an in-season tournament title. In doing so, you beat one of the better teams in the country, a top 10 team in Penn State in overtime. What did you like about last weekend in your team's performances?
Well, I liked we had energy again. I thought we faced two good opponents. First, RPI. I think that's a great version of RPI. They're well coached and they had good structure, and we got by them. And we faced an opponent that's got a whole lot of offense in Penn State. So we were very pleased to get by both opponents.
You look at that second game, goes into overtime. They scored a late goal. I think it was 23 or so seconds left. And then I think your goaltender made a great save in overtime. You come down and get a power play goal. Your team in overtime this year, not bad. You've had a couple of overtime wins, a few ties. You've played a lot of extra session games. But what does it say, the ability to kind of bounce back from a late goal and not put the heads down and still have a lot of confidence there in the overtime session?
Well, I think we've got good belief in the room. I mean, you have to have a belief in yourself, and goals happen. I mean, a 6-on-4 situation, you've got a whole lot of good offensive players, so you can't hang your head. You got to come back, and then the team did that. Then you're right. Tyler made a save and gave us a chance, and obviously we capitalized on our power play. And it's uncharacteristic of getting power plays, and they had one in overtime, and then we have one.
Your team started this season. They played a game on the first possible day way back in October, and that started a stretch of 14 straight games over 7 weekends. You got a bye before last weekend's tournament, a bye week, if you will, an off week, whatever you want to call it. How needed was that bye? I know you had mentioned something about mental fatigue after the 14th game. There was a loss to UConn, but how much did you need that week off just to maybe get some healthy bodies, regroup, and kind of recenter?
Yeah, taking nothing away from UConn. They played a good game against us, but I just thought we were fatigued for a couple weekends. And, it's just a young team. We've got 9 freshmen and 12 sophomores. And I thought we played a lot of hockey in the early going, and it showed. So that week off was welcome for us. And I thought we came back last weekend with a lot more energy.
We're talking with Norm Bazin, head coach at UMass Lowell. People nationally have been noticing the play of your goaltender, Tyler Wall, this season. Some really terrific numbers, .947 save percentage, 1.62 goals against. Better numbers than last year and his freshman year. What is different in Tyler's game that has given him that success so far?
Well, I don't think much is different, to be frank with you. I just think he's matured. I think these guys come back for their senior year, and it's why kids should come back for their senior year. They actually dominate a level. So we're very happy for him. Sometimes we've put a little too much pressure on him as a team, but that's just because we've tried a lot of young guys in the lineup, and he gets a few more shots than we would like at times. In any sense, he's standing his ground, and he's been nothing short of very strong for us.
Somebody who got off to a slow start, one of your top scorers last year, Connor Sodergren, has had a terrific November. What's turned around for him?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I thought our junior class came alive last weekend, and I thought Charlie Levesque won the bulk of his faceoffs and was, chipping in each game, and Sodergren came alive with a 2-goal game, then another helper, and that's a new form line with Levesque, Sodergren, and Lee. So glad that they give us even more depth. And what's changing in Connor, I think a few things have gone in, and he's started to breathe again. I think you start gripping when you can't put the puck in the net, and you start breathing again when a few of them go in.
Well, a guy that has not gripped his stick too tight, he's been playing well. Freshman Matt Brown, not the biggest player on the ice, but he seems to really be in a lot of situations. He gets into corners, he skates well, shoots the puck well. Talk a little bit about him, what he can add to an offense.
Yeah, offensively, he can be a real spark plug for you. And he's got great acceleration. I think that's what makes him stand apart at times is he can really scoot out there and changes the pace of a game with his skating. Obviously he's learning some things on the defensive side of things, but I think there's great balance on that line with three freshmen, with Kaiser being a good two-way player, with Berglund winning some face-offs, and with Brown, I guess, creating some open space.
Something very interesting, Norm. You took an approach this season. You did not name a captain at the beginning of the season. You had, I believe, 5 players wearing the A on their jersey. You wanted to figure out where leadership would come from. How has that worked for you in the locker room, on the ice, even off the ice, and just the relationships of players? And what type of leadership do you get when you kind of go by committee in a way like that?
Well, I think it's worked out well for us so far. We're going to distribute responsibility equally among 6 guys, actually. And when you have a young team, I think everybody can shoulder some of the load responsibility-wise to get the team going and to get the process going for us. I think confidence is a process, and slowly but surely everybody chips in, and for us, it's worked thus far.
One of those guys wearing a letter, Kenny Hausinger, he's been a fun guy to watch. I know for me over his career, a senior now, really well-spoken kid, talking to him a couple of times. What do you like about him? He seems to be a guy that is just one of those real true heart guys that, wears his heart in his sleeve, enjoys and loves what he does every day.
Yeah, he's a competitor. I think he gives us a little swagger when he's on his game. He's tough to match up against, and you know what? He's a fierce competitor. Sometimes it gets the better of him from a standpoint of mixing it up. At the same time, he gives you a swagger, and he's a very, very important part on our hockey club.
Norm, this weekend, we mentioned it in the start, it's the game of the week. You're going to play 2 against Providence. You've seen the Friars once this year, an overtime win down at Providence. You're going to start the series down there on Friday night, finish it back at home on Saturday. This has been a Providence team that over the years has matched up pretty well with Lowell. What do they do that is a challenge? It seems sometimes when I watch them play, they seem like they play somewhat similar to what Lowell does. Is that one of the things that makes it more difficult when you're playing the mirror image of yourself? And what are some of their strengths that make it so difficult to play against a Providence team?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at different teams in different years, it's hard to compare, to be honest with you, because I think this year they've got a whole lot of offensive upside in Dugan and Moynihan. Those guys, I think they're at 31 points and 25 points. One's got 12 goals. The other one's got a bushload of assists. So every year is a little different, but they play hard. They're a good hockey club. They're obviously well coached. It's a good matchup both ways. So we enjoy playing good teams. Obviously, if you don't bring your A game, you're not going to win against teams like that. And we felt the same way about Penn State. Unless you play your best game, they're going to leave you in dust. And we hope to bring our best game to Providence on Friday.
Well, it certainly will be a great test for your team. UMass Lowell against Providence Friday night in Providence, Saturday, a 6:05 start in Lowell. Norm Bazin, head coach of UMass Lowell. We appreciate your time tonight. Best of luck this weekend and certainly throughout the rest of the season.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thank you.
That's Norm Bazin, head coach of UMass Lowell. More of the Game of the Week podcast coming up.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO.com. Our Game of the Week this weekend, home and home, Providence and UMass Lowell. And it's interesting, Nate Lehman and Norm Bazin both came in at the same time at their schools. First year behind the bench, Norm took UMass Lowell from 5 wins to 24 wins. Went from 8 wins to 14 wins for Nate Lehman. And in his 4th season, a national championship and 6 straight trips to the NCAA tournament. These are 2 teams that are perennially strong in Hockey East, and this should be a terrific matchup this weekend.
Yeah, it's really interesting what these two coaches have done for their program. Obviously, Norm Bazin, 5 straight Hockey East title games. They won 3 Hockey East championships in that span. You mentioned Nate Lehman and his national championship. That's a pretty impressive thing to put on your resume. But these two teams, they play a very similar style of hockey. They like to, kind of ride the puck handler. It's very hard to find space out on that ice. Both teams have some good speed they can use at times, and that's kind of where you can exploit things. And then the power play. I feel like special teams, when these two teams get together, really matters. And they've played some classic games over the year, a triple overtime game back in the Hockey East tournament back in 2016. That was won by Lowell. The first year, Lowell was the number 2 seed in the Hockey East playoffs when Norm and Nate both got to their respective schools. And Providence, the 7th seed, came into Lowell and knocked them off. So there have been some really good playoff matchups between these two teams. There have also been some really good regular season matchups. They've already had one this year, an overtime win for the Riverhawks down in Providence. So I expect 2 really competitive games, fun to watch games if you're a spectator. This is good hockey. This is some big boy hockey this weekend you'll see between these two clubs.
Is there a little bit of an offensive edge in this one for Providence? I think of Jack Dugan, who everybody already is talking about, the sophomore, as being one of the top Hobie candidates, but he's also got his teammate Tice Thompson.
Yeah, and those two guys play on different lines when you're talking 5-on-5. So you've got 2 really good offensive catalysts on those top 2 lines for Providence. The power play, they get together usually, and they can be pretty explosive together. I agree that those are some pretty good scoring talents right there for Providence. Lowell has a little bit of their own, but I really think that when it comes down to it, where the place where Lowell would have the best chance to win this game is on goaltending. I think they really have a great goaltender there in Tyler Wall, and 5 times this year he's been the Hockey East Defensive Player of the Week, including last week. So this is a Lowell team that I think they have the offensive abilities, but they also know how to keep the puck out of the net. So it'll be interesting when you can kind of put this, I won't call it a high-flying offense, but certainly some 2 elite players, 2 offensive talents on Providence against a very good goaltender.
Yeah, we mentioned Tyler Wall in our conversation with Norm Bazin. Yeah, he has been spectacular so far this season. Well, let's turn to the ECAC one premier matchup. Although Harvard has dropped 2 in a row, at one point we thought this might be a matchup of 2 unbeaten teams. Cornell still the only unblemished record in college hockey. Number 2 Cornell at number 12 Harvard on Friday night.
That's a really good matchup. I think Harvard should come in hungry. They maybe met their kryptonite after 6 ECAC games to start. They went 6-0 those games. They faced Hockey East back-to-back, Boston College and Boston University. The most recent of those games, a 4-2 loss to BU on Tuesday night. But they've suddenly, had a couple of bumps in the road here. It'll be interesting to see how they handle that adversity. And Cornell, they just keep rolling. I mean, they're 9-0. They're playing well. They did a great job last weekend down at Madison Square Garden, 2-0 win over Boston University. They seem to have, we mentioned it, I think, on our spotlight, that they find ways to win games. They wear teams down. They have excellent goaltending. They have great defensive structure. This should be another very good heavyweight type battle. The fact that it's at Harvard, I think maybe that gives a little bit more of an advantage to the Crimson. But again, I don't think that Cornell has been phased no matter where they have to play the games.
Let's take a look at the NCHC before we get to some interesting non-conference matchups. Number 3, North Dakota. They are on a roll. They head to Kalamazoo for a pair at Western Michigan.
Yeah, it's 11 unbeaten for the Fighting Hawks, 10-0-1. And Western Michigan, they're 3-2 in their last 5. And I think everybody knows that this Western Michigan team is an improved team from last year, an improved team from maybe the teams over the last few years. The one thing that they just haven't seemed to show is consistency. They haven't been able to put together some sort of a streak. And, you have this opportunity to take on, arguably one of the best teams in the country, North Dakota, and, certainly the best team right now in the NCHC. You're on home ice. Can you pull out a win? Can you pull out more than a win? Maybe get, some extra points in overtimes or shootouts, or could you pull off a sweep? That's obviously what Andy Murray and his team's goals are. But this is a very talented North Dakota team. They will be tough for the challenge for Western Michigan.
2 losses last weekend to number 1 Minnesota State dropped Minnesota Duluth from number 8 to number 14 in the USCHO.com poll. The voters pretty harsh on that one. A very good Mavericks team against the Bulldogs. But number 14 Minnesota Duluth, they get to travel for a pair to number 18 Omaha.
Yeah, this is an Omaha team that has not been very consistent of late. Only 2 wins in their last 7 games. They had last weekend off. Prior to that, it was a 3-on-3 overtime loss to Miami, and then a 4-1 loss to Miami the next night. And those games were at home. So you can tell this is an Omaha team that really feels that they need to start getting the apple cart upright again, because they started the season pretty strong. And they'll take on Minnesota Duluth. That should be a pretty hungry team. The fact that it is in Omaha, maybe that can give the Mavericks a little bit of, comfort and hope, and maybe some home ice advantage. It should be a good crowd there, I would hope. But this is going to be a Duluth team. They don't lose back-to-back games too often. So the fact that they at home lost both of them to Minnesota State, they have to be desperate. They have to feel pretty hungry.
It's a big weekend series for the nation's only independent Division I men's team, Arizona State. The Sun Devils hosting Denver for a pair. This has huge pairwise rankings implications. A sweep by Arizona State should move them right into the mix for the playoffs. A split keeps them pretty solid. A couple of losses and they start to move a little further outside the bubble. Same implications for Denver. Right now they're number 4 in the USCHO.com poll. A couple of losses there could mean the difference between a first seed and second or third come the end of the season.
Yeah, certainly. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. Arizona State, they put together their own schedule. You never know whether it's going to be a schedule with a bunch of nationally ranked teams or, teams that kind of fell to the bottom. You sometimes have some instincts. Obviously, you believe that a team like Denver will always be a pretty perennial contender. So this is one of those that I'm sure that Greg Powers has circled on his calendar, understanding that, a couple of wins here, it goes so far in terms of what an independent team can do to make the NCAA tournament. We saw last year, Arizona State win a few of these good quality matchups. You're at home. The first one is at Oceanside, which I think is a place where they have a massive home ice advantage. Saturday, they'll head out to Glendale to the home of the Coyotes. In the bigger building. That has not been as friendly a building to Arizona State over their time. They've tried to limit the number of games they really play there because there's no real home ice advantage there. So Denver, I think they should come in and hopefully want to understand the seriousness of this series, that this cannot be a team you take lightly. It's been proven over and over again for the last couple of years. You take Arizona State lightly, you're going to walk away with losses. So Denver has to go in there and play 2 of their better games to come away with victories.
And then the strangest home-and-home series that you'll see all season. On Friday, number 9 Notre Dame at number 10 Boston College. Boston College travels to Notre Dame on Sunday. And Jim, this is the story of 2 teams going in very different directions. Boston College has won 7 in a row, including the win over Harvard last weekend. Meanwhile, we remember that Notre Dame was swept home and home by Bowling Green last weekend. But Notre Dame only has 1 win in its last 6 games. Overtime at Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago, then a tie and a loss at Michigan State the weekend before last. So things are not going in a very good direction, kind of a bump in the road for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, it has been. They have not been playing their best hockey, and I haven't talked to Jeff. I haven't really been that in tune with his team, Jeff Jackson, that is their head coach, to know if they're healthy, if they're going through an injury bug or whatnot. But this has not been the results. They started out gangbusters. They were playing really solid hockey out of the stretch, and I think everybody knows this is a Notre Dame team that likes to play with the lead. They don't like to chase the game. They're not usually as successful when they have to chase the game. So that becomes a big part of it, is how you kind of approach the first 40 minutes. Can you build that lead? This BC team, they're rolling. They quietly put together 7 straight wins. Some quality opponents in there, some decent opponents, some middle of the road teams, but they've taken care of business no matter who the opponent is. The fact that this is a home and home is just befuddling to me. I guess I know that Notre Dame usually can take a private plane. They charter a plane. I don't know what Boston College is doing in this situation, if they're hopping on a commercial flight, as they usually do tend to fly commercial. So regardless, it's just, you're going to play Friday night. You're going to wake up Saturday morning. You're going to hop on an airplane. If you have a private plane, you can probably leave on Friday night and be back in South Bend by about 1 a.m. But it's crazy to me to actually play this as a home and home. The NHL, you got to think of their home and homes. If I'm the Boston Bruins, maybe there's a home and home with Montreal separated by a day. Maybe there's a home and home with the Rangers separated by a day. But you're not going out and playing the Blackhawks usually in a home and home series, or the St. Louis Blues, and that's kind of what this amounts to. You're traveling, halfway across the country with one travel day, and then you're just going to get back on the ice and play the same opponent. But good for them to keep this rivalry going. This was always a great one before Hockey East in Notre Dame. When Notre Dame came into the league, obviously it dilutes that rivalry because you play that many more times. But now that they're non-league opponents once again, I think it's good to keep this going. These are two teams that should play each other. They play every year in football, and that is kind of the anticipated, the battle of the Catholics. And I hope that this hockey rivalry can keep going for these two schools.
Well, we'll find out what happened over the weekend on Monday on USCHO Weekend Review as Jim and I break down the weekend. And if you missed it on Tuesday, we had a great conversation with Army West Point head coach Brian Riley on USCHO Spotlight. Subscribe to all our podcasts at uscho.com/podcasts. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.